Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something you specifically requested, the intersection of faith and the Boy Scouts of America.
Okay.
I know you're interested in this whole duty to God concept.
Yeah.
And we've got some Boy Scouts of America training materials
Okay.
for chaplains and chaplain aides to help guide us here.
Interesting.
I got to admit, I've always been kind of curious about this topic.
Okay.
I knew about things like Scout Sunday, but I never realized how deeply faith is like intertwined with the organization.
It's definitely woven into the very fabric of scouting.
Yeah.
To fully appreciate it, we need to go back to the founder, Robert Baden-Powell.
Okay.
He once said, and I quote, "The whole of it is based on religion, that is, on the realization of and service to God."
Wow.
That statement really highlights how central faith was from the very beginning.
That's a powerful statement. It sounds like he saw faith as more than just attending religious services.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He believed that it was about living a life of service,
Yeah.
which is reflected in the Scout Law and the emphasis on doing good deeds daily.
You're right. Those daily good turns, it's not just about like personal piety. It's about putting faith into action.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to see how that's baked into the Scout oath as well.
Mm-hmm.
On my honor, I will do my best
Right.
to do my duty to God and my country and to obey the Scout Law. We all recited that,
Right.
but I'm hearing it with like fresh ears now.
And this idea is further emphasized in the Boy Scouts of America's Declaration of Religious Principle.
Okay.
They state that no member can grow into the best kind of citizen without recognizing an obligation to God.
Mm.
That's a pretty strong statement, don't you think?
It is. It definitely makes you think about the relationship between faith and citizenship, especially in a diverse society like ours.
Right.
But before we get too into that, I noticed something interesting in these training materials.
Okay.
There's a strong emphasis on interfaith considerations.
Yes. It's a common misconception that scouting is tied to specific religions. The Boy Scouts of America recognizes and welcomes a diverse range of faiths.
Mm.
In fact, the training manual even lists Buddhist, Hindu, Islamic, and Sikh organizations as examples.
That's surprising, to be honest.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that level of inclusivity.
Mm-hmm.
So how do they approach duty to God in such a diverse environment? Is there a common thread?
The concept of the Golden Rule seems to be that unifying thread.
Yeah.
It transcends individual faiths and appears in various forms across different religions.
Okay.
The training emphasizes the shared value system
Okay.
as a way to connect duty to God with practical actions.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
Treat others as you want to be treated is like a universal concept, right?
Yeah.
But how does it actually play out in scouting activities?
Well, the training guide actually gives examples of how to incorporate the Golden Rule into everyday scouting.
Okay.
For instance, they suggest having scouts from different faiths share how their beliefs inform their actions.
Interesting.
This helps break down stereotypes and encourages empathy and understanding.
That's a great example. It's not just about talking about the Golden Rule.
Right.
It's about actively demonstrating it through interactions and shared experiences.
Exactly. It's about putting those values into action.
Yeah.
Now, shifting gears a bit, I'm curious,
Yeah.
before we dive into these materials,
Yeah.
what did you envision the roles of chaplains and chaplain aides to be in scouting?
Honestly, I had a very limited view.
Okay.
I pictured them like leading prayers at camp and maybe some sort of Sunday service.
Okay.
But beyond that, I was clueless.
It's a common assumption,
Yeah.
but it goes much deeper than that.
Okay.
According to the training guide, their roles are multifaceted.
Okay.
They're responsible for providing a spiritual tone to activities, guiding conversations about faith and values,
Okay.
encouraging participation in religious emblem programs, and collaborating with the chartered organization representative.
Wait, the chartered organization representative?
Yeah.
Isn't that the liaison between the troop and the sponsoring organization,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a church or community group?
Yeah.
So they're connecting the Scout faith experience back to their community.
That's right. It's a holistic approach,
Yeah.
integrating faith into the overall scouting experience and connecting it to the Scouts' broader community.
Okay.
It's not just about isolated spiritual moments.
That's fascinating.
Okay.
It really highlights how integrated the roles of chaplains and chaplain aides are in the overall functioning of the troop.
Right.
But I'm curious, the training guide mentioned chaplain aides.
Yeah.
What exactly do they do?
Well, chaplain aides are actually elected positions within the troop.
Okay.
They have to be first-class scouts who are actively working on their religious emblems. So it's
Yeah.
not just about popularity.
Yeah.
They need to show leadership and commitment to their faith.
That's a really interesting detail.
Yeah.
It ties leadership development directly to faith.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about spiritual reflection.
Right.
It's about empowering them to, like, take on leadership roles
Yeah,
and demonstrate those values in action.
exactly. And speaking of connecting faith and scouting in a structured way,
Okay.
the training materials also emphasize Scout Anniversary Week,
Right.
which includes Scout Sunday and Scout Sabbath.
Ah, Scout Sunday. I remember that.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it's part of a larger celebration.
Yes, it is. It's
Ah.
a time when Scouts are encouraged to connect with their faith communities
Mm-hmm.
and participate in services.
Okay.
There are even specific patches and guidelines for how Scouts should participate,
Wow.
showcasing how this integration is woven into the program.
So it's not just a suggestion.
Right.
It's a formalized way to acknowledge the connection between scouting and faith.
Exactly.
Does the training offer any specific examples of how troops mark this week?
It does. They suggest creative service projects that chaplains and chaplain aides can lead during Scout Anniversary Week. For example, they recommend creating interfaith signs for a chapel to make everyone feel welcome,
Mm-hmm.
designing unit chaplain neckerchiefs,
Okay. Yeah.
or putting together inspirational readings for Scout Sunday services.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's much more than just attending a service in uniform.
Mm-hmm.
It encourages active participation
Right.
in the spiritual life of the troop and the community.
Right.
And it's clear from the training materials that they take these roles and responsibilities very seriously.
They do.
I was particularly struck by the module on guiding conversations.
Okay.
They emphasize active listening
Mm-hmm.
and even suggest having a mental health professional lead at that part of the training.
That really stood out to me as well. It's
Yeah.
not just about spiritual guidance.
Right.
It's about equipping them to handle sensitive situations, whether it's grief,
Yeah.
discipline issues,
Okay.
or helping Scouts cope with the loss of a loved one.
Yeah.
They are truly mentors and guides.
That level of responsibility is impressive.
It is.
And I would never have guessed it was part of the chaplain's role.
Yeah.
Did they offer any specific advice on how to have these difficult conversations?
Absolutely.
Mm.
They suggest practical techniques for teaching active listening skills.
Like what?
One example is having participants retell each other's stories
Okay.
to ensure they truly understand
Mhm.
and are engaging with what's being said, not just passively listening.
That's a simple yet effective way
Yeah,
to illustrate the importance of active listening.
it is.
It's not just about hearing the words.
Right.
It's about truly absorbing and connecting with the message.
And that's at the heart of the chaplain's role, isn't it?
Yeah.
To be a guide, a mentor, and a source of support for the Scouts on their spiritual journey.
Yeah.
They play a significant role in shaping the scouting experience.
This has definitely been eye-opening.
Yeah.
It's clear duty to God is much more than just a motto in Scouting. It shapes everything from daily good turns
Mm-hmm.
to leadership development and how Scouts interact with their faith communities.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's a deeply ingrained value system
Mm.
woven into the organization's fabric.
Okay.
And what's fascinating is
Yeah.
that the training materials even reference some studies
Really?
that shed light on the impact of this approach.
Okay. Now you've really piqued my interest.
Yeah.
What kind of studies are we talking about?
They mentioned the Princeton study,
Okay.
the Ruber Youth Report,
Oh.
and a study by Harris Interactive.
Okay.
While they weren't specifically focused on duty to God,
Okay.
they offer some compelling insights nonetheless.
Okay, before we jump into those,
Yeah.
I think this is a good place to pause
Oh,
when
yeah.
we come back.
Mm-hmm.
Let's dive into what those studies tell us about the impact of Scouting
Okay.
and explore how it all connects back to this idea of duty to God.
Sounds good. Welcome back. Before the break, we were about to delve into some research on the impact of scouting.
Yes.
As I mentioned, these studies weren't specifically about duty to God,
Right.
but they offer some compelling insights nonetheless.
Yeah, I'm really curious to hear more about them.
Okay.
What did these studies actually find?
Well, the Princeton study, conducted in the late 90s,
Yeah.
surveyed parents about their concerns for their children.
Hmm.
The most common worry,
What's that?
that their kids wouldn't develop strong moral values.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
Every parent wants their children to to grow up to be good people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Around the same time, the Roper Youth Report found that young people themselves also placed a high value on things like honesty, ethical behavior,
Right.
and strong family relationships.
So it wasn't just parents pushing these values.
Right.
Young people were already prioritizing them.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Where does the scouting connection come in?
That's where the Harris Interactive study comes in.
Okay.
They focus specifically on adults who had been scouts for at least 5 years.
Okay.
So people with significant experience in the organization.
Got it.
They found that 91% of these former scouts said scouting helped them overcome adversity and face problems with courage.
Wow.
87% said it boosted their self-confidence.
Okay.
And 83% credited scouting with teaching them valuable leadership skills.
Wow, those are some impressive numbers.
Yeah.
It sounds like scouting had a genuine impact on their personal development,
It seems so.
which makes you wonder if duty to God played a part in that.
It's a question worth considering.
Yeah.
What I find particularly interesting is that 73% of those surveyed also attributed their financial responsibility to their time in scouting.
Really, financial responsibility.
Yeah.
That wasn't something I would have immediately connected to scouting.
Yeah.
Though I guess the values of planning and resourcefulness are definitely emphasized.
Right. While they may not be learning specific financial skills, it seems those broader values instilled through scouting can have an impact on how they approach various aspects of life, including finances.
It's fascinating to think about how those skills and values learned through scouting can, like, ripple outwards, influencing different areas of a person's life.
And this ripple effect is even more evident in the Baylor University study.
Okay.
They compared Eagle Scouts to non-Eagle Scouts and non-Scouts.
Okay.
And the results were pretty striking.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Okay.
What did they discover about Eagle Scouts?
They found that Eagle Scouts were much more likely to engage in healthy activities, have strong ties to their communities, and hold a strong belief in service to others.
It's amazing to think that all those camping trips, community service projects, and leadership roles could have such a lasting effect.
It seems so. The study also found that Eagle Scouts were more likely to be committed to achieving personal, professional, and spiritual goals.
That really connects back to the idea of duty to God, doesn't it?
It does.
This commitment to a higher purpose, to service, to personal growth. It's not just about attending religious services.
Right.
It's about living a life guided by those values.
Yes, and it's not just about individual growth either.
Okay.
The Baylor study also found that Eagle Scouts were more likely to exhibit higher levels of tolerance and respect for diversity.
That's incredibly important, especially in today's world.
Yeah.
Does the study offer any insights into why that might be?
While they don't explicitly link it to duty to God,
Yeah.
it makes you wonder if the interfaith approach we discussed earlier, with its emphasis on the golden rule and understanding different perspectives, might contribute to greater tolerance and inclusivity.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's like this positive feedback loop. Scouting encourages interfaith understanding and tolerance.
Right.
Which then leads to more positive social outcomes.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's compelling evidence.
Okay.
Though we must remember that correlation doesn't equal causation.
Right. There could be other factors at play.
Yeah.
Maybe kids who are already inclined towards service and community involvement are simply more drawn to scouting in the first place.
That's a valid point.
Yeah.
However, even with those caveats, these studies still offer a fascinating glimpse into the potential impact of scouting, especially when considering how central duty to God is to the organization's framework.
It definitely makes you rethink some assumptions about the Boy Scouts of America and their approach to faith and character development.
It does, doesn't it? And it leads us back to something we touched on earlier. That statement from the Declaration of Religious Principle. About recognizing an obligation to God being necessary for good citizenship.
Yes, that's a statement that really made me stop and think. How does that idea hold up in today's increasingly secular society?
It's a complex question with no easy answers.
Right.
If we connect this to the larger societal trends, we see a growing number of people identifying as agnostic or atheist.
That's true.
How does that fit into the Boy Scouts' definition of good citizenship?
That's a good question. Does it mean they're excluded from this idea of good citizenship according to the BSA?
It's a question that has fueled debate and discussion for years.
Yeah.
Some argue that this stance is discriminatory
Right.
and excludes those who don't adhere to traditional religious beliefs.
It's understandable that some would have that concern.
Right.
However, others might argue that recognizing a higher power,
Yeah.
even if not defined as God in the traditional sense, can foster a sense of moral responsibility and accountability.
Right.
That's essential for good citizenship.
That's a valid perspective as well.
Yeah.
There are many ways to interpret that statement and its implications for individuals and society.
It's a fascinating debate that goes beyond Scouting itself.
It just does.
It touches on broader questions about the role of faith in a pluralistic society.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a conversation worth having, especially as society evolves and grapples with questions about faith, pluralism, and the meaning of responsible citizenship.
You're right. It's a topic that deserves further exploration.
Yeah.
But for now, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
I think so, too.
We've explored the history and principles behind duty to God, the roles of chaplains and chaplain aides,
Right.
and even examined research suggesting a link between Scouting and positive life outcomes.
We've certainly unpacked a lot.
We have.
It's clear that duty to God in Scouting is much more than a motto.
Yeah.
It's a principle woven into the very fabric of the organization, influencing everything from everyday actions to leadership development and the way Scouts engage with their communities.
And as we've seen, it raises some thought-provoking questions about faith, citizenship, and how these concepts intersect in a diverse and evolving society.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But before we wrap up,
Okay.
I want to shift gears one last time
Okay.
and talk about some resources available to our listeners.
Yes, there's a lot more to explore beyond our conversation today.
That's right.
In the show notes, you'll find links to information on the Pre-A program,
Okay.
which encourages Scouts to develop their own personal prayer life. There are also details about the different religious emblem programs,
Right.
which allows Scouts to explore their faith in greater depth.
And we've also included some thought-provoking articles on the relationship between Scouting and faith in the 21st century.
Okay.
Exploring how these concepts continue to evolve and intersect.
We encourage you to check them out and continue your deep dive into this fascinating topic.
Yeah.
But before you do, let's leave our listener with one final thought to ponder. We've talked about the studies suggesting a connection between Scouting, duty to God, and positive life outcomes.
Right.
The Boy Scouts of America states that recognizing an obligation to God is essential for good citizenship. But how does that concept resonate in a world where fewer people subscribe to traditional religious beliefs?
That's the question that keeps coming back to me.
Right.
How will the BSA navigate this this evolving landscape,
Right.
where spirituality and faith might take on different forms than they have in the past?
You're right. It's a tension that goes beyond Scouting.
It does.
It's a societal question. Will the Boy Scouts of America adapt their interpretation of duty to God
Yeah.
or risk becoming increasingly irrelevant to a growing segment of the population?
It's a fascinating dilemma.
It is.
They could emphasize the universal values at the heart of duty to God, service, integrity, respect, regardless of one's specific religious beliefs or lack thereof.
That would certainly broaden the appeal
Right.
and make it more inclusive. On the other hand, it could be seen as diluting the original intent and straying from the organization's founding principles.
Exactly. It's a balancing act.
It is.
And it'll be interesting to see what path they choose.
Right.
Will they hold fast to tradition or evolve to reflect the changing world around them?
Yeah, it's a choice many organizations are grappling with.
It is.
And it's a choice that could have significant implications for the future of Scouting.
Right.
This deep dive is really giving me a lot to think about.
Yeah, me too.
And I hope our listener feels the same way.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
Ultimately, this exploration of duty to God in Scouting leads us to a much larger question.
What's that?
What does it mean to be a good citizen in the 21st century? How do we define that? And what role does faith, in whatever form it takes, play in shaping those values? That's something I'll be pondering long after we finish this conversation.
Well said.
Yeah.
That's a great note to end on. A thought-provoking question that leaves our listener with something to chew on.
Right.
Thanks for guiding us through this Fascinating deep dive. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure our listener did too.
It was my pleasure. Always happy to explore these complex topics and hopefully spark some insightful conversations along the way.